You know, if I asked you to name the sacred book of Christianity, you'd probably say the Bible. For Islam, you'd say the Quran. But what about Buddhism? It feels like there should be a simple one-word answer, right? Well, it turns out the real story is so much more interesting than just a single book. Let's dive in and see what's really at the heart of Buddhist scripture.
So, asking the question this way, what's the Bible of Buddhism? It's actually the perfect place to start. It's the way most of us would think about it. And it's a great question because the answer really gets to the very core of what makes Buddhism so unique.
And yeah, the surprising answer is there isn't one. That's right. Buddhism doesn't have a single central book that everyone points to. A better way to think about it is to picture a huge, sprawling library with different wings and new rooms being built over many, many centuries. So, to help us navigate this incredible library, here's our roadmap. First, we're going to really lock in why it's not just one book. Then, we'll head to the oldest part of the collection, the Tipitaka. We'll peek inside its famous 3 baskets, see how the library started to expand, and finally, figure out what this all tells us about Buddhism as a dynamic, living tradition. Okay, so why so many different texts? Well, it's because as Buddhism spread across Asia, different traditions developed their own collections of what they considered authoritative scriptures, or canons. And get this isn't seen as a problem or some kind of contradiction. It's actually a core feature of the faith, showing how it's adapted and been thought about so deeply over centuries.
So in a library this massive, where do you even start? We're going to begin right at the foundation. We're talking about the oldest and most complete collection of Buddhist scripture that we have. This is the cornerstone of the whole tradition, preserved by what's known as the Theravada school of Buddhism.
It's called the Pali Canon, or, and I love this name, the Tipitaka, which literally means the 3 baskets. It was written down in an ancient language called Pali, which is a close cousin to Sanskrit. And this collection, it's the absolute bedrock of the Buddhist teachings as the earliest communities understood them.
Now, what's really fascinating is how it's all organized. That name, the 3 baskets, isn't just a poetic little nickname, it's a literal description of its structure. The original texts were organized into 3 distinct categories, creating this incredibly logical system for keeping all this wisdom safe and accessible.
So here they are, the 3 baskets. First up is the Vinaya Pitaka. You can think of this as the rulebook, the code of conduct for monks and nuns. Then you've got the Sutta Pitaka, and this is really the heart of it all. It contains thousands of talks and discourses believed to have come directly from the Buddha. And finally, there's the Abhidhamma Pitaka, a super deep, complex philosophical dive into the nature of the mind and reality itself.
Let's just zoom in on that second basket for a second, the Sutta Pitaka. Inside it is probably the most beloved text for many Buddhists worldwide, the Dhammapada. And this one line shows you its power. Its very first verse, "Mind is the forerunner of all actions," is one of the most famous quotes in all of world literature. It's just so direct, so profound, and totally timeless. But wait, the story doesn't stop there with the Pali Canon. Not even close. As Buddhism spread and evolved, new schools of thought popped up, and they didn't just write commentaries on the old texts, they started adding entirely new wings to our scriptural library. Now, the key to this whole expansion is the idea of a sutra, which basically just means a discourse or teaching from the Buddha. The Mahayana tradition, which really took off in places like China, Japan, and Tibet, introduced a huge new collection of sutras that they believed were authentic teachings, just saved for a later audience that was ready to hear them. And this really shows us a fundamental fork in the road. For the Theravada tradition, the Pali Canon is and always will be the ultimate authority. But for the Mahayana tradition, these new sutras, they aren't just add-ons. They are seen as equally authentic, equally profound expressions of the Buddha's wisdom just revealed at a later time. And some of these new sutras are incredibly influential. I mean, you have the Heart Sutra, a powerful meditation on the concept of emptiness that millions recite every single day. There's the Lotus Sutra, which just blew the doors open on the idea of who could achieve enlightenment, and the Diamond Sutra, a totally mind-bending dialogue about perception itself. And the library kept on growing. Tibetan Buddhism introduced some really unique ideas like terma. These are believed to be hidden treasure teachings, concealed by ancient masters, only to be rediscovered centuries later when the world was ready for them. The most famous of these is the Bardo Todol, which most of us in the West know as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, an incredible guide to the journey between death and rebirth. So when you step back and look at all this ever-expounding library of texts, what does it all mean? Well, it shows us that Buddhism isn't some static religion that was just frozen in time. It's dynamic, it's intellectually rich, and it's constantly exploring its own deepest ideas. This really brings us to the main point, which is stated perfectly right here. Buddhism is not a religion with one book and one reading. It's a living tradition, and it's defined by a long, vibrant history of commentary, interpretation, and even debate. It's as intellectually alive as any great philosophical tradition on the planet.
And that leaves us with one final big question to think about. If this vast, diverse tradition isn't held together by a single, unchanging book, then what is it that holds it all together? What's the common thread running through this magnificent library of wisdom? Now that's a question worth pondering.